Hello and welcome to the Scaled Agile 101 webinar by Clearvision. My name's Neil Butler and I'm a founder of Clearvision, and I'm going to be talking to you today about Agile culture and particularly how to scale it. I'm then going to hand over to Nigel who's our Head of Client Services for EMEA, and he's going to be talking about implementing SAFe using the Atlassian toolset. And then at the end we'll have time for questions and answers, so if you do have questions throughout either of the presentations, please enter them through the webinar portal. Now, I'm going to assume that you know what Agile is and why it's a good thing, but actually, why is it gaining so much popularity? Well, if we were trying to plan a large program of work, say 2 or 3 years, we know that thinking ahead that over that distance is rarely 100% accurate. And why is that? Well, because understanding all of the variables up front is really difficult. And all of the estimating we're doing on all of the work that we've got to do without any experience at all is just guesswork. We also know that I can write something down and think I've been really clear, but actually I quite often when I'm writing designs forget to include vital details, and also the people reading my designs can misinterpret the way that I've written things or think I'm trying to say one thing when actually I was trying to say something else. It's absolutely impossible for us to plan for unknown external impacts, and that could be something as small as a train delay or as big as the building being unavailable for 2 weeks due to a flood. So although we can include contingency, it's rarely very accurate. And on top of all that, our users' needs and priorities are likely to change also throughout the program. So they'll be hit by unforeseen external events. They won't understand all the variables in their own business. And so what they believe they need at the start of the program of work is very unlikely to be the very same as it is at the end of the program of work. But conversely, we know that starting work early will allow us to prove some assumptions, so we'll know that all the guesses we made were right. And also it's going to provide us with some real data, that will allow us to be really accurate with the estimates and forecasts that we're making. It's going to immediately highlight any aspects that we overlooked and forgot to put into our plans. And it's going to bring risks to the left of the plan because we're going to be testing far earlier in the process. And we'll know by testing with users whether this is the sort of thing they were looking for. Because the whole spirit of Agile is about continuous improvement, the sooner we start, the longer the period of continuous improvement, and therefore the more productive we'll be over time. And best of all, as soon as we produce something, we're going to deliver a tangible benefit. And this means that our users are going to immediately start to be able to see that benefit and use it, and the business is going to get some effect from it. And why do waterfall plans slip? Well, again, we're asked at the very start of this process to very accurately predict over maybe 3, maybe 5 years how a plan is going to run. But everything is different to this plan than any previous project we've run. If you look at the technology that you're using, technology is just developing so fast at the moment that it's really likely that whatever technologies you're using now, there's going to be some that are different to the technologies you used in the past. The problem you're trying to solve is going to be different to any problem you've previously solved, and the solution therefore is going to be different. It's likely that you won't be using exactly the same team as you've used before, so there'll be different strengths and weaknesses at play. And the situation that you're developing and delivering the project in is also going to be different. So planning over that period is going to be hard, and that's why waterfall plans are rarely accurate. So the problem our customers keep talking to us about, we're doing Agile, we're trying it, we've got all the stuff, we think we're doing it right, but it's not being successful. In fact, it's no better for us than waterfall was. And why is that? Well, the reason we think is that Agile is usually adopted for websites, and it's adopted for websites because it's a simple thing to try first and you can pilot it quite easy, and every company needs a website refresh, whether that's building a new website for a new product or refreshing their existing website. But the problem is that websites technically are quite easy, and Agile works really well for them because you can get very quick and rapid user feedback. However, if you don't have a solid foundation in place and you haven't really adopted true cultural change needed for Agile throughout the organization, then as soon as you try and scale it, you're going to run into problems. There's no doubt about it. Agile is a hands-on sport. Agile is not just for the software development team hidden away in the basement. You can't just assume that your teams are going to adopt Agile and they won't need your help. You're going to have to get really involved as a management team, and you're going to have to work with those Agile teams to understand what's blocking them, where the bottlenecks are, and how you can help to make them more productive and ultimately faster and delivering better quality software. So where do we start? Well, we start with a single vision. You need to make sure that all of your team are pulling in the same direction, and a vision is no more complex than a simple communication tool. And it's just something to make sure that all of your team understand where they need to be and what they're aiming at, and they can all drive towards it. It should be clear enough that they understand when they're slightly behind schedule, but they're going for some big goal. And why is that important? Well, because if it's not inspirational, your team aren't going to be motivated and they aren't going to be driving. This is a really trite phrase. People don't come to work to build a wall, they come to build a cathedral, but there's a grain of truth in it. They want to come, people need a reason to come out of bed, and they want to come to work for you to be building something that they know will make a difference. So give them a vision that enables them to see that and put it up everywhere around the project floor. And that perhaps might mean changing the company ethos. How many of us work for companies where making money is the bottom line? Driving revenue, driving shareholder value is everything, and that's all the companies talk about. But how inspiring is that really? If you can build products that your customers love and services that your customers cannot do without, then I can guarantee you your shareholder value will go up and your revenues will go up. But that's what we should be focusing on, isn't it? Giving our teams and our staff a goal, an aspirational goal that is going to be product related or service related. And we can't really fully adopt Agile if we're going to stay in our silos. If nothing else, we've seen over the last few years of Agile adoption that technology and technology teams are really the enabler for the business vision. But it doesn't work unless the business teams are fully integrated with the Agile teams together. So there needs to be this constant integration, and that might mean changing some of your structures, and that might be uncomfortable with some of the senior management team who perhaps their remit is going to change, perhaps their team size is going to change. But again, we can dance around this, but unless we're going to make those changes, you won't be able to successfully adopt Agile. It does go further than that though, so sometimes it's the simple things that we need to change. And here's a list of some items which, unless we're considering them, we won't be truly Agile. The working environment absolutely is different for Agile people. So gone are the cubicles and gone are the kind of stuffy office buildings. Whenever you walk around the floor of an Agile project, you'll see lots of bright colors, you'll see monitors with status on it, you'll see Kanban boards, breakout spaces, and all of this stuff is really important because unless people love the environment they're working in, A, they won't be as creative, and B, they won't enjoy coming to work. So make a real effort to make your working spaces as agile and productive as possible. I know Nigel's going to talk about the use of collaborative tools later, but I can't stress how important it is that your teams can communicate and collaborate effectively, both in and out of the office. It might even be that you've got multiple teams spread either in different countries or in different locations, which we know is difficult to achieve with Agile. So making sure the baseline program infrastructure of tooling is there and that people can communicate effectively is a high priority. Making use of DevOps tooling, the cloud, and continuous delivery, understanding your pipeline and how to constantly tweak that pipeline to get it to be faster and more effective is essential. And of course, there's this ethos throughout Agile about constant improvement, continuous improvement. And so having those metrics and the data so that you're constantly analyzing where the bottlenecks in your process are and what you can do to improve it and how the teams can get faster and faster is essential. Probably most important is to empower your teams. And what does that mean? That really means for your organizations delegating responsibility down throughout the organization. So to give you a simple example, if you've got a central commercial function who need to approve all contracts and they only meet once a month and you have to be at that board on that date, otherwise it doesn't get approved and you're waiting another month, that can't work for agile teams. That's really going to slow them down. So you need to delegate by putting empowered commercial resources amongst your program team, allowing them to make decisions, and then having them come back and maybe report to a central authority once a month, but they're empowered to make the decision there and then. What you'll realise as you go down this journey is that there is no single answer, there is no textbook you can read that will tell you how to do this stuff properly. Each organisation is different and you're going to have to find out what works best for you and adopt that. But here's the warning. Agile is no silver bullet. I hear lots of organisations saying we're going to save money by going agile, we're going to be faster by going agile, and the bad news is you're really not. Agile is difficult to get right and you have to be focused on implementing it properly if you're going to make it work for your organisation. It won't be cheaper. It won't be faster. If you want to write a page of code, it's going to take you the same amount of time in Waterfall as it is in Agile. But you will get a number of benefits which will help your organisation. So firstly, you'll see early benefits being realised by the development teams and a validation that what you're building is the right thing. Throughout the whole process, you'll get greater visibility of progress and also of the things blocking you so you can take more proactive action. And you'll get improved directional control. If you don't think there's any value in continuing to progress with the product, you can stop it there and then. You've still built a huge amount of it and you're still getting the benefits from it, and you can now put that team onto something else. So just to talk briefly about Scaled Agile methods, there are 3 that are in the domain that are very popular, which are SAFe, LESS and DAD. They're still relatively immature, so every year you'll see them improving and sending out updates, but they're all free to use and they're all available, so you can do some research on Google. Primarily, all of these methods are trying to do the same things, which is they're trying to formalize this link between the business strategy and the development teams. They're trying to set some common standards which all of the agile teams then adhere to. And they're trying to scale the collaboration, the communication, the alignment that agile teams do so well. And again, you might find that adopting this method and not trying to deviate from it is maybe not the right approach for you. So I've seen in plenty of places that they may take some of the ideas from SAFe, but mix it with their own culture and their own processes and ways of working to create something more successful. So that's the end of my piece on culture. Before I hand over to Nigel, I just wanted to remind you that if you do have any questions, please log them through the webinar portal. And with that, I hand over to Nigel.
Thank you, Neil. As Neil mentioned, collaboration is key to the success of a Scaled Agile project. And in this section, I want to talk about how the Atlassian tools can help organize, plan, and monitor a project. As with all Agile projects, transparency is really, really important. So making it easy for people to find information, the sort of information they need to do their jobs, is vital. And I find too many organizations still have work in spreadsheets and emails and other places where people can't find them. Atlassian produces a suite of these collaboration tools. There's Jira, providing ticketing functionality to store your backlog, to organize and allocate your work to users, manage sprints and that kind of thing. Confluence acts as a collaboration and knowledge management tool. Bitbucket provides version control, which is vital so that teams can store all their source code safely in one place. So there's a golden source of truth for the source code that you're deploying to your customers, and an audit history, so you have traceability from the changes you've committed to the source code system back to the ticketing, so you know why you've made the change and you can actually see the code changes themselves. And then there's Bamboo for build and continuous integration. Finally, tools such as HipChat and Stride for instant messaging. For this talk, I'm going to concentrate only on Jira and Confluence. I'm also going to mostly refer to the Scaled Agile framework, or SAFe, as it's quite often known. But the patterns and solutions I'm going to talk about are easily applied to other frameworks as well. You might just need to change a few of the names or use different terminology. So let's start with Jira. Now, out of the box inside Jira, there is a simple hierarchy of 3 levels. Well, actually, quite a few people just use 2 of these. The epics represent large items of work. Quite often they're features. These are then broken down into stories, which the developers then bring into sprints, work on individually. These then can also be split into subtasks if you want to, if you need to share the work out against multiple people. But the epics and the stories are the main 2 that describe the functionality or changes that are required. Now this works well because it's nice and simple for small teams. And if I look at SAFe on the next slide, this gives you an example of the simple SAFe solution, which is called Essential SAFe. And this has 2 levels, one at the team level where they're working on stories and things like that, and then a level above it, the program level, which manages what they call in SAFe terms features. This really equates to the epics and stories hierarchy that we've just seen on the previous page. So Jira works well for this pattern. The only little niggle is that SAFe calls them features, Jira calls them epics. Once you're past that, it's a pretty neat fit, and this works well for a number of small organizations. The challenge starts to come on the next slide, where you see a large solution SAFe, and this is the next level up. Then there's a even larger model than this, which I'll perhaps go into on another day. But on this one, we've got hierarchies that are a bit more complicated, and there's a requirement to have something called a capability, which then gets broken into features, which then gets broken into stories. And this scaling allows more and more teams to be managed and larger pieces of work to be managed perhaps across project. The challenge is then how to implement this sort of solution inside Jira. And the way we do this is we create a Jira issue type. And we're going to call it a capability in this case, so it matches the terminology used in SAFe. And quite often we'll store this in a project on its own. And I want to move away from the slides now and actually show you how it looks inside Jira. So here we have a Kanban board inside Jira showing capabilities. And there's a workflow here represented on the Kanban board. And the reason why we use a Kanban board is because it's nice and visual. It makes it very easy for people to see where the work is, what status it's in, and also it encourages people to start talking about the flow of work. Items of work start on the left-hand side, where they're in the planning phase, and they're finished when they hit the right-hand side, when they've been released or they've been closed, marked as done. And until then, they're kind of considered waste because we're spending time working on them, but we haven't delivered value to our customers. So the sooner we can get things from the left-hand side to the right-hand side, the quicker we can start bringing value to our customers. It's ordered in priority order. So, for example, on the left-hand side here, if I want to change the priority of these, I can do that simply by moving them up and down. So as a product owner for a solution, I can prioritize the work and I can make it visible to everybody what my intent is and how important these things are for me. This workflow you can see here is taken from the SAFe website, and it's just an example of a typical sort of workflow that SAFe recommend. But it doesn't have to be this way, and one of the things we quite often do as consultants working with customers trying to implement Scaled Agile is to create workflows that match how they want to work. But the one represented in the SAFe website is a pretty good example and pretty good starting point for a lot of customers. Very easy to use, and it becomes a single source of truth when you start displaying it here. So quite often when you have your meetings, your planning meetings, you'll discuss the priorities and things like that. I've done some tricks here, such as I've got a swim lane here, which is representing some blocked capabilities. So if there was a stakeholder meeting, perhaps they'd start talking about this one here first, because this one can't progress to the next status because of some issue that needs to be discussed. Let's look into a bit more detail of these capability issues. I'll take you onto the next screen here. So this is a standard Jira issue, but we've done some customizations on it. Some extra fields, for example, like on the left-hand side here, we have the weighted shortest job first value, which is calculated from these fields above. And this is a safe calculation that is used to help prioritize the stories and other types of issue in the backlog. And it's used by the cost of delay, the size, the risk, and the value. All those get scored, and then it produces a value which you can then compare against other issues. Got some progress monitors. For example, we can see the number of remaining story points, the number of completed story points, and things like RAG statuses as well. So we could have a red, amber, green color to try and highlight whether it's on track, delayed, in trouble, that kind of thing. There's some standard fields, the description, the summary. Things like assignee could be used to represent who the stakeholder are. We can do watchers and voters, things like that. We can also add attachments, which might be design documents or other documents like business cases. We can store comments about the capability, so we can start building up a history of conversations where people are discussing it. And finally, at the bottom here, we have a list of the child issues here. Each of these are epics that the capability has been broken down into. And in turn, these will then get broken down into stories. So you have a link between the epic, which represents the feature in safe language, and the capability that it belongs to. Quite often these are cross-project as well. So a capability might have several projects with required changes in order to achieve it. Jira allows for that in its modeling. So these epics could be in different sorts of projects. And I can see the status of each of these as well. So I can see whether they're being worked on, whether they've been completed, that sort of thing. Next, I want to show you or introduce you to Portfolio. So this is Jira's planning and forecasting tool. So Jira is a fantastic ticketing tool, but you need something like Portfolio as an add-on to help do the forecasting. And this tool lets you balance the three sort of pillars of the scope, the capacity or the resources that you have available, and the release dates. Now in this example here, I've split this into three different products, which is all part of the big solution that we're walking towards. And those are represented by the three little timelines, one for each of the products down here. And luckily they're all looking green at the moment. I can also see on this timeline the epics that are going to make up my work, when they're likely to be delivered, which sprint, for example, that they're likely to be delivered in. The bottom half of the screen, I've got a little bit more information about the scope of work. This represents the priority of things. I can make some changes to these if I want to as a product owner. Portfolio lets me play in a sort of sandbox environment without making changes to Jira until I push the changes back. So for example, I wanted to change the priority of these, I could just drag and drop the priority of these around, and that will replan my plan for me when I press the calculate button. And then if I want to, I can push those changes back to Jira so everyone gets an idea about the changes that we've requested in the plan. I'm also representing on here the program increments. Now in safe terms, these are a cadence. It's normally 8 to 12 weeks, something like that. So about 4 to 6 week sprints, less if you have longer sprint durations. And at the end of each program increment, the teams gather together to do retrospection, tell everyone what they've learned, large sort of demo of the product as it is at that point in time, and then they plan the next program increment from that point as well. So these are very important milestones in SAFe, and you can see that I've modeled them in this example every 6 sprints, just so people know what they are. And I've started to allocate work to them using the releases down here, so we can show the intent of which epics that we want to be part of the program increment at each one. So this is a great way of modeling the work and showing our intent. Now the way Portfolio quite often works is that at the end of each sprint, you'll create a new plan, because at the end of each sprint, you'll have learned something new about after you've achieved the work from the previous sprint, the backlog will have changed. You'll have had feedback from your customers and stakeholders. So the backlog will evolve. And this is one of the huge differences, I think, between waterfall and agile projects. With agile projects, you're encouraging and embracing this change. So this evolving plan and this consistent replanning is a really positive thing, and it's seen by agile evangelists as really positive, not as a negative thing, that we want the plan to change. That means we're evolving and learning things. And a tool such as Portfolio is an essential part of that, because it enables you to quickly and efficiently create these new plans, and then you can publish these plans out to your team so everyone can see what the new plan is, what the new intent is, what the scopes for each next target are. I mentioned the hierarchies before. We had the capability level, the epics, and the stories. These are also represented in Portfolio. So at this level here, we have epics, and I can see at the bottom here the epics broken down into stories, things like that. But I can also go up a level, and we can move up to the capability level, and that will show you a slightly different view. And you can see that some of them have been added to capabilities. There are issues with that as well, and you can see when these capabilities are likely to be delivered. These also we can drill down into if we want to. These turn into epics and then stories. And as I reprioritize epics and stories, I can see the effect that that has on the deadlines for the capability. And if I was using a different safe pattern, so for example, if I was using the sort of portfolio framework, that which has another level above capabilities, I could also model that using portfolio, and it would just give me another higher level than capabilities. So it's a very flexible tool, and you can use it in a lot of different ways. Last thing I want to talk about before we move on to the Q&A session is Confluence. So as I mentioned at the start, having transparency of all the information, making it easy for people to find things is absolutely essential to what we're trying to achieve today. So using a tool such as Confluence to store all your documentation is really, really useful. So we quite often find we have team spaces where teams can collaborate, store information such as their retrospectives, minutes from their meetings, where they can store tips and tricks, hold information about themselves. So it becomes a bit of a social gathering for people as well, because you want people to be able to collaborate with each other, and sometimes having information about people helps that. But things like requirements as well are a fantastic thing to try and create. So rather than creating tickets immediately on the backlog, perhaps using a document such as this requirements template inside Confluence is a great way to start. So you can start documenting the goals, the strategic fit, and you can create different sorts of blueprints. You don't have to use the out-of-the-box ones if you don't want to. Tailor them to how your business wants to work. And once you've created the document inside Confluence, we can then collaborate. We can press the share button at the top here, so we can invite people in to come and collaborate on it. We can mention people in the document as well, so they get notifications, so they're aware of it. And the idea is to try and encourage people to start collaborating on the requirements early on in the process, as early as possible, really. So we're going to remove all the uncertainty. We're going to highlight risks. We're going to have discussions about, what the value is, how it can be achieved, that kind of thing, early on in the project. And then it becomes a very easy thing to then create the tickets from Confluence in Jira. They become linked, so you can see the progress inside Confluence as well. So it's a really excellent way of working and collaborating. And that is all I have time for, I'm afraid. So we're going to now move over to the Q&A session.
Our first question for the audience is, how large does your development team need to be to make using a scaled agile framework worthwhile? So I'll have first shot at answering that, and then let Neil give his input. So I think really the answer to that is when it becomes useful. You can have a few teams working together, say 3 or 4 teams that are collaborating well, working together, producing code well. And as long as you've got that collaboration, you don't need to break that by adding any extra complexity. But if there is a need to produce reporting at a higher level, to manage the teams, to try and push them in a direction, then it is time to start thinking about using a scaled agile framework such as SAFe or LESS or DA. From the book, it's like 4 or 5 teams, anything above that. Neil, have you got any comments? Nope. Okay, number 2. The question is, how do you ensure code quality at scale? There's quite a few techniques for making sure your quality's good. I think it's a lot of the agile development practices for this, such as automated testing, unit testing, and then behavioral testing. Techniques such as continuous integration make a huge difference, and also techniques such as DevOps, BDD, all those kind of practices can all make your development quality a lot better. Let's not forget tooling. So tools such as static code analysis and style checking, any of those tools that make sure that your quality of your code you're producing is safe, it's secure, it's consistent, and it's maintainable, all help. And the third question, what can you do if the senior team are not interested in promoting Agile? That's a really tough one. The only really thing you can do at that point is to start small, use a pilot or something like that, and prove to your stakeholders that it works, that it adds benefit to your business. That way you don't need to invest a large amount of money, you're not taking a huge amount of risk. You could quite often find a very small pilot project that you can run and just prove the technique. And that's a great agile way of working anyway, so it really is sort of acting like you would do in an agile way, starting small, learning, feeding back, incrementally adding value all the time. And that's it for the questions. I hope you've all enjoyed the presentation today. We'll be sending out a link at the end with the feedback, and if you've had any difficulty listening, because I had a couple of people comment on the Q&A that they sound was chopping in and out, we'll be sending out a link to the recording so you can listen to it afterwards. Thank you all for your time today.